Yeah. See, when you are talking about India as a fiscal federal system, uh, I consider that like a joint family. India had a culture of joint family, unlike in the West. You will have a grandfather, you have a grandmother, you have a father, your mother, your daughter in law, your sister in law, your grandchild. All of them will be living under the same roof. This is, we call it as joint family. And there is hardly any family without difference of opinion. And there is no, and if it is a joint family, the problems are likely to be more. Of course, there are problems. So I want to say is that there are problems between union and the states. Starting with, as I said, even though the state governments were given the right to tax three major commodities, they had to surrender, sacrifice 60% of their revenue. Whereas the union government surrendered only about 40% of their revenue because their revenue was mostly coming from the direct taxes. Now the question came, how will you divide the tax? When you take the total tax money, how will you divide it? State wanted, say, we surrendered 60%, you give us 60%. No, it was not possible. So there was lot of negotiation. And at that time, the finance minister was a very seasoned statesman. Then there was a new act, GST Compensation Act was passed. Then came, where will you get this money? Compensation cess was charged on so-called luxury goods, goods which attract highest tax rate. And that money was used and they kept the word till 5 years. They gave this compensation, GST compensation was given. Those states who recorded growth rate lower than 14% were given the balance money by the union as compensation. And many states, after 2022, after 5 years, even we wanted the compensation to be extended because I wrote an article wherein I argued that GST came into being because we, the states, made largest sacrifice. So there should be GST compensation so long as there is GST. That was my argument. But they didn't give. They didn't give. So what I'm trying to say that there were conflicts. But to resolve the conflict in a more democratic manner, they formed a GST council. Every month, the GST council meet. This is chaired by the finance minister of the union of the center, Sitaraman. She chairs that meeting. All the finance ministers are members of this meeting, of this committee. But this is looks very democratic, and they and all the decisions are to be taken by discussion. The point I'm trying to say that there is a democratic setup called GST Council, but don't think that all is well there. In the GST Council, all are equal, but some are more equal. You will find that one third of the vote is given to union government. So they have a union government has a high hand in decision making. That is a fact.
So we have this compensation problem here because some states we have a very diverse country because
Mm.
you know that São Paulo in the south They are way richer than the Northeast and the
mm,
North.
mm.
So there will be those compensation funds, billionaire compensation funds, and to compensate the poor states that are in the Northeast and the North. And I don't. We are going through this huge fiscal crisis now, monetary crisis, and I don't know how the federal government will find the money to pay for these compensation funds. The former minister Paulo Guedes, he didn't want the GST reform as it is being done because he objected to the compensation funds. He
Okay.
thought that the federal government would not be able to pay to compensate the poor states. So we can predict huge conflicts here, and we are already seeing many governors that they simply do not accept the reform. The most vocal is Ronaldo Caiado from Goiás. He's saying that he will go to justice to fight this reform. So we are headed for conflict. And I don't know, I think we should have just one GST on a state level here. That would be ideal. But that's not what they did. We have to accept what they did for at least for the first years. But we are already seeing that ongoing conflict here between the
No,
states
I
and the
think
federal government.